Months of rumour and speculation all come to an end today as we return to racing for the opening event of what promises to be an enthralling season. Welcome along then to round one of this year's Formula One World Championship. We go racing today then in the state of Victoria, where the drivers have 14 corners and 3.28 miles to navigate at an average lap speed of around 120 miles per hour. The close proximity of the barriers make accidents inevitable, and recent history shows us that a safety car is not at all out of the question. So with the race not far away from starting, here's what today's grid rundown looks like. What a qualifying yesterday for George Russell. He'll start today's race from pole position. And it's Charles Leclerc in P2. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Norris, Mayer, Fernando Alonso and Albon, Stroll, Antonelli, Jackson and Ollie Behrman, Gasly, Hadjar, Gabriel Bortoleto and Colapinto, Doohan, Hulkenberg, Carlos Sainz and Esteban Ocon, Aaron, Maloney, Pepe Marti and Liam Lawson rounds off the grid. Now it's almost time for lights out, so let's go down to the track. And joining me in the commentary box this afternoon, the First Lady of World Motorsports, Naomi Schiff. So a new driver signed for next season, which is good news all round. Or is it? Halfway through a campaign? How does a team cope with that?
Yeah, it's a really aggressive decision, and to announce it that early, I guess you kind of raise the question, why did they do it? But this is a driver that's really sought after, so I kind of understand why they would want to bag that driver as early as possible. But hopefully for them, that doesn't cause too much distraction, and they make sure they keep their team right now motivated until the end of the season.
Here we go then. The formation lap is underway, and the track temperature looks warm. That may or may not play into some of the team's hands for today's race. So as all the cars reform the grid, the drivers will be hoping to get a strong start. They'll want to earn some valuable points from today's race, with final communications being done with their race engineers, ensuring their planned strategies are all in place.
All right, there we have our possible strategies for the race today in Australia. Looking pretty promising for a two-stop with the tire mod that we have. It's in the description. I remembered to put it in the description this time compared to last season in Silverstone. We have George Russell on the front row next to Charles Leclerc. 5 red lights are going to be coming on. George Russell, Leclerc, front row. Konnersport starting in the top 10. 5 red lights are off. Russell off to a good start, as well as Albon, you see pushing up to P5. You see a lot of cars going side by side. You see a Red Bull there on the inside. I believe that's Oliver Behrman. That's going to be Norris on the inside corner of turn 2. As Russell holds on to P2, Jackson fell back a few positions on Hadjar and Behrman. Gasly holding on to P9 as we're going through the grid. A little flash of that light blue from the Gulf Williams. Looking to see where our drivers are slotting through as we go through the grid. A flash of pink from Colapinto as we're coming through Sector 2 now, turn 6 and 7 to the fast-paced section of Albert Park, going through the DRS, or the first DRS section. Going through the grid, Leclerc is still holding off Russell. Russell's about 2/10 back. Callie Mayer replacing George Russell. So basically, for the storyline, what I was thinking was that they were part of a trade deal because Konnersport is a Mercedes engine team. But we're going to have to wait and see how that turns out this season to see what's going to happen for our next season in 2027. We're going through the rest of the grid here. Going to try to get some good looks on the liveries that we haven't gotten to see in the preseason episode. If you guys saw the preseason episode, the Konnersport logo, or Konnersport livery, the still shots, and we'll see plenty of the Konnersport car during the race and the season. Alonso P7 ahead of Lance Stroll. So we're going through here. See what kind of gaps are forming. We see a train between Russell and Alonso forming, and then Stroll, and I believe all the way down to Esteban Ocon, and then Maloney in the final four is where our trains are starting to form. Leclerc already a second clear of George Russell, so we see Hulkenberg now trying to get a good look at that Audi livery. And one thing I did notice with the livery choices for this season, that there's a lot of black paint and a lot of carbon fiber, but that does make sense for the 2026 season. On board with Esteban Ocon and Zane Maloney, Paul Aaron, Liam Lawson, Pepe Marty in the Ford Racing Bull, looking really good with that white, green, and blue. So we're back on board with our top 10, going through the rest of the grid, seeing what kind of moves can be made here at the end of lap 2. Back on board with Jackson to see if he can make an overtake on Gasly, while Behrman's looking to try to push against him. We see Gasly in the McLaren pushing away, up 7 tenths, 8 tenths. Now we see Behrman on the right side in the mirror, not enough to make a move, but we have Hadjar sneaking up behind Behrman on the outside, making a move here for P11. As Jackson is going to be looking to push those medium tires. Now the end of lap 3. Jackson's going to be able to make an opportunity on Gasly and Stroll. Lap 3, turn 11, and that's going to be 2 positions for Aiden Jackson. Very strong move on medium tires with this new tire compound regulation for the storyline's sake. Little snap there coming through the corner with Jackson 3.5 seconds, 3.6 seconds now behind Alonso from the end of that lap. Lap 7 now. Hadjar looking to make a move on Gasly and Stroll as they're side by side. And this is pretty much where the tires are going to start to act up. You saw the cars ahead of Hadjar snapping back and forth. The little snaps can really cause some issues for these drivers as we're going through. Hadjar gaining position on Behrman, not enough for Gasly. He's just gonna have DRS. He's gonna have to file in behind and look to make a move past turn 8. So we're coming up to turn 3 and 4. Pink Alpine of Colapinto running P13, Carlos Sainz, and that's gonna be smoke coming from one of the cars. It's gonna be Hulkenberg in the Audi. As we're gonna definitely put a note in for that incident and put it in the news. We'll post it on social media and the YouTube community tab for some outreach, so you guys can see those posts. You guys can always check in on these episodes to see how we are going. 2 seconds now is the gap between Leclerc and Russell, as Russell, I'm not bad, is finding Callie Mayer for P2. Callie Mayer and Russell swapped teams in the off season. We decided to elect George Russell because we managed to get his contract cheaper than Callie Mayer, surprisingly. So they basically, for storyline's sake, swapped teams because Konnersport is remaining a Mercedes engine buyer this season. We'll have to see what we can do next season about that, as Jackson is in pretty much no man's land before the first set of pit stops. Currently sitting P8, 3.4 seconds behind Alonso. And he's still 3 seconds clear of Lance Stroll, as we see Russell overtaking Callie Mayer at the end of lap 9. Here on turn 11 of lap 9, before the final DRS sector. There's a side-by-side coming into turn 12. That's going to be Albon behind, looking to make an overtake. That's going to be Russell diving into the pits for the first pit stop of the race, as Leclerc. No, that's going to be Leclerc in as well. So it's going to be Leclerc. No, Leclerc stayed out, so it's going to be Russell, Norris, Albon. I could be wrong. A lot of moving around right now as we see George Russell coming out, Albon coming out behind. I believe that's Doohan and Stroll. So the first 4 drivers to come into the pits. So we see them coming out. Hulkenberg DNF before the first iteration of pit stops. So Leclerc now 4.3 seconds ahead of Callie Mayer and Antonelli. So Mercedes running good right now. We're still waiting to see who comes into the pits at the end of this next lap. Alonso P4, Norris P5 in that Red Bull Ford. Jackson sitting P6, Hadjar 7, Gasly 8, Behrman 9, Colapinto and that pink and black Alpine sitting on P10 ahead of Carlos Sainz. Russell came back out at P13 with Albon 1.2 seconds behind. So he's looking to defend him to see what kind of undercuts they can do. So we see Leclerc, his turn going to be dipping into the pits. And what I thought was a surprise is that a lot of these drivers coming into the pits are on hard tires. I'm driving as Jackson, and we're driving with medium tires. I honestly thought that there was more tire life on those medium tires, as we see Lando Norris holding Charles Leclerc up. Traffic issue for Calimere. I'm not sure if it was an issue or if it was traffic, but a lot of changing around in the pits. Carlos Sainz electing to stay out. He's sitting P4. Antonelli P1, P2 for Jackson. So we see Hadjar coming out. A lot of latency issues that I've noticed. I don't have any updates that I need to do. Everything's up to date. It's just everything's a manual install, so I'm not sure if that's the issue. Gonna be on board with Pepe Marti, P21, left rear issue for putting a tire back on. He's gonna be losing out on that. Audi not having a great start to the season, and that goes the same with VCarb or Ford Racing Bulls and Toyota Haas, as well as Alpine. On board with Jackson, who's 4.5 seconds behind Antonelli. And like I said, medium tires. It's the end of lap 11, and I believe we're going to be coming in at the end of this lap. Oliver Behrman back by 4.2 seconds. Carlos Sainz sitting in P4, another 2.4 seconds. So we see the main straight is empty, so Antonelli came into the pits as well. You see there he is on the right side. See what kind of other pit crews coming out. Antonelli can be holding on to the lead currently. No, Sainz is going to be on the lead, as we see no issues for Jackson. Calimere staying out on track. Cheat pit the last lap. Behrman coming out now. Hadjar out on track. Behrman's probably going to lose position to Bortoletto as well. No, Bortoletto's coming into the pits as we go through the grid to see who is out and who is in. Paul Aaron, one of the rookies, coming in for a new set of medium tires. And that's going to be it for our first set of pit stops, I believe, other than Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz is 3/10 ahead of George Russell, coming through sector 2, coming up to turn 9, losing ground on George Russell. When is George Russell going to make this move? I don't know. Coming through the chicane, turn 10, DRS activation down to turn 11, and that's going to be the position for George Russell into turn 11, I believe, if not the next straight. On board with Jackson now. Albon gaining position on Leclerc up ahead. Lap 13 now. We're on board with Russell's when he's actually able to make a move on Carlos Sainz. It's going to be that right-hander of turn 3 here at the end of sector 1, start of sector 2. Russell, provisional pole, or I keep saying provisional pole, but it is provisional podium win, or provisional win for George Russell at the moment. He has Carlos Sainz closing. No, Albon ahead now, lap 15. So we're on board with Jackson. And it's going to be a pit stop for Carlos Sainz. So Carlos Sainz running on his set of tires to lap 15. Jackson is holding off Hadjar. Carlos Sainz in the pits. Gasly P10 now after he comes through. So we're looking pretty good about halfway through this race. We're going to get a good look at these liveries here in a moment, as we're looking to see what Hadjar might be doing as we go through. Albon currently leading George Russell by 3/10 down the second half of this track. And that's going to be Calimere, Lando Norris ahead as we're on board with Jackson. And like it was said in Silverstone, we're going to be saying hello and welcome back to our F1 TV commentators.
Well, Martin, there's been so much action so far this weekend, and before I forget, welcome to the 2026 season. With the regulation changes this season, there has been a noticeable shift in performance among most teams on the grid, with Mercedes, Ferrari and Konnersport battling for positions in the top 10. In a surprising turn, Albon in the Gulf Williams is leading against George Russell.
Thank you, Crofty. It's great to be back. You have to admire the effort Williams put in during the off-season. No one would have expected Albon, of all people, to be battling for the top spot on the podium in the first race of the season.
We are currently on board with Jackson, battling his former teammate Callie Mayer, who signed with Mercedes. So we do want to take a moment to check in on the pit wall with Konnersport's team principal. Casper, it's great to hear from you again. How was your off-season?
The off-season was a great one. The team was hard at work back at the factories to ensure the car was ready for this year's regulation changes. We were also able to get some minor upgrades ready for the race that we had researched towards the end of last season.
What are your thoughts on Konnersport's lineup for this season, considering your history with Callie? Both of you played a significant role in ensuring the team's continued presence today, as they are now driving for a rival team.
In the end, Formula One is a sport. I just opened the door for Callie and she did the rest. And the decision to move to another team is always the driver's final decision. We just happen to have several drivers in mind if that situation happened.
We want to thank you for that quick input, Casper, and glad to see you decided to stay with the sport another season. As we move on to some insight about other teams' upgrades and progression through the off-season with Laura Winter.
Well, Crofty, if you look at the times from practice and qualifying and compare them with Abu Dhabi and last season's home opener, we can see some significant improvement from Williams, Alpine and Ford Racing Bulls. That is the information that we have on record. That's all data, but that leaves out the driver side of things, as we clearly see how the off-season has mixed up who is in what seats this season, which definitely makes for an interesting season to come.
And I believe Ted Kravitz is there with you, Laura. What information can be shared about the regulation changes for the grid this season?
You bring up a great point there, Martin. The regulations have changed for both aero and chassis, but we also had an additional regulation changed specifically to the tyres to add a little bit more strategy to each race, requiring each tyre compound to be adjusted to be softer than previous seasons, almost like when F1 had super softs. In turn, this will require teams to rely more on a minimum of a two-stop race, depending on track. And if you haven't already noticed, we have drivers actually coming in for their second stops. I believe I just saw Alonso down the way, and I'm actually sitting across from the McLaren pit box, which means I'm sitting next to Zach Brown, which I believe Crofty wanted to check in with next.
That is correct, Zach. We wanted to check in with you because it seems like your new lineup is still pushing for some points after a close constructors battle against Ferrari last season. How was the team preparing for this race weekend, knowing you were so close to winning that constructors?
Well, the team as a whole knew that we had to keep our momentum going no matter what. With Oscar stepping away from F1 and Lando going onwards to Red Bull, the team knew we needed a good lineup, and that's how we ended up with who we have for this season. If we look back at last season, we see how Carlos was able to give some very valuable input to Williams, and now they're fighting for a top spot again after so many years. And Gasly's been around long enough to know how to get comfortable with the cars through regulation changes. So I know we have a strong lineup for this season.
With Piastri out this season, was there any consideration of bringing in another rookie instead of a current driver on the grid, maybe one already signed by another team but currently racing elsewhere?
We had discussed that around September of last season with the news our previous drivers weren't going to be here this season. And there's plenty of talent in reserves in F2, but with the regulation changes, the team made the decision to keep our interests towards current drivers that have managed to work through regulation changes, but that doesn't stop us from having options for seasons going forward if need be.
We will have to be sure to keep an eye out on the Paddock Talk and any possible changes for next year's lineup, and I'm sure that we will get plenty of that. But to my surprise, we actually managed to get one of last season's drivers here in the commentary box with us, Lewis Hamilton, everyone. How was your off-season?
You know, it actually was pretty good. I was able to unwind after having to deal with Roscoe and spent plenty of time with family through the holidays. Definitely immediately got into planning what I want to do during this season since I'm not actually driving.
I'm sure you're still doing your mentorships through the different Formula series.
Oh yeah, still doing Formula-related stuff, mostly with F1 Academy and F2, but I'm still around for Ferrari, especially after our constructors win against McLaren last season.
I've been meaning to ask, and there's no pressure to answer right away, but will the 7-time world champion in you be racing again next season? Technically, you're in free agency at the moment.
There's always that opportunity, Crofty, and we will have to wait and see.
Well, that's going to wrap up our visit from 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. Currently a quote-unquote free agent for racing as he takes on a mentorship-type role in the world of Formula racing.
I still like to think of him as an 8-time champ from time to time. People are still on about the 2021 result.
I'm sure there are still people out there fighting the truth on that, but that was then, and this is now, as we are wrapping up the rest of the pit stops, it looks like, as we're nearing the end of the first race of the 2026 season. Because currently 8 laps stand between Alexander Albon and that top step of the podium, which would be a great start to the season for Gulf Williams.
All right, we're coming back to a little bit of action. For Carlos Sainz is going to be slow through turn 10 through turn 11. That's going to be smoked. So that's going to be another yellow flag and another retirement for a driver here in the first race of the 2026 season. Coming through the rest of this grid as we see who all are in the backfield. Carlos Sainz coming through the grid. Maloney we're on board with, leading against Liam Lawson by 8 seconds. Lawson defending against Pepe Marty and Paul Aaron in P21. Back on board to the front runners. Alonso coming through turn 5. Coming back on board with Jackson through turn 5. As we see our provisional top 3. But at the end of lap 25, we have Leclerc looking to put pressure on Jackson. Albon leading 2 seconds ahead of Russell. Russell leading 2.1 seconds ahead of Alonso, but the highlight is this move right here. Leclerc looking to make a move on the inside, but you know how we're gonna do it. We're gonna brake late on the outside of turn 1, cover him off, and defend him as much as we can. Lap 26 now. He's looking to make a move on the inside before turn 3. Not quite there. We have a little bit of extra life on these medium tires compared to George Russell, because like I said earlier, we feel more confident on these medium tires than the hard tires, and I have a feeling it's going to be like that throughout the entirety of the rest of this season, but we'll have to wait and see as we move on to the final lap on board with none other than Alexander Albon in the Gulf Williams coming through sector 2, turn 9, turn 10. He's going to be the lead driver of this race to win. We knew Williams was going to be running good at the end of the season, and that information that they held throughout the off season really paid off and got him not only a podium but a race win to start the 2026 season. As we see George Russell in the background in the Konnersport, bringing another podium to the team for Konnersport. As we see our top 3, George Russell crossing the line for P2, and then there it is, Fernando Alonso for P3.
Alexander Albon takes the checkered flag.
Well, they kept us guessing during pre-season testing. We all wondered who it was going to be, and to have them drawn out here today, that they are the ones to beat, just goes to show that all the work they put in has really counted.
So much to talk about. We will continue to do so. But first, it is time for the podium. Alex Albon will drink this in. He's heading to the top step. Well, what an end to another fantastic weekend of racing. Thanks to everyone who's joined us, and we'll see you for the next one.
All right, there we have it. An epic finish for our first race in the 2026 season. George Russell starting on pole, getting beat out by Alexander Albon, who came up from P6, and then Fernando Alonso came from the same third row for that final spot on the podium. Aiden Jackson moving up to P4 from P9. And Hadjar, we fought Hadjar as Jackson for a little bit there in the race, as well as Callie Mayer. Callie Mayer dropped from P4 to P9. So we had a pretty much a decent battle between a lot of people this race. I thought the battle was going to be more towards Williams, Ferrari, and Mercedes, but it's just pretty widespread here as Albon, Russell. Let's see, top 10. If we're looking at the top 10, both Red Bulls finished in the top 10, both Mercedes finished in the top 10, and both Konnersport cars. Now that we go down to the standings, here are our standings as they start the top 10 result for the first race. And the constructor standings after the first race weekend of the season. Gulf Williams beating Konnersport by 1 point. So it's going to be Williams versus Konnersport. Aston Martin falling behind in third place at 15 points. Mercedes and Ferrari at 10. And then Red Bull at 5 for this first race. Audi Sport with 1 retirement, as well as McLaren. It's going to be Carlos Sainz with that retirement later in the race. Nico Hulkenberg with that early lap 8 retirement. And a lot of action throughout this race with that tire mod. I did forget to include it in the description of Silverstone last season. If I remember, I will go back and include that description, or include that mod in the description. It will be included in this description. So to the creator of the mod, I apologize for not giving you credit in the last season. But without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up here in this first episode of the 2026 season on F1 25 with Konnersport, and we'll see you guys in the next one.